Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Today's topic is service learning and engagement strategies for adults and families. Before we really dive into it, I want to go over some just housekeeping items. If you're having some troubleshooting, some issues with or technical difficulties, please type into the chat box or the comments box, and we will do our best to help you. I know with the weather the way that it is, sometimes that can cause some extra difficulties when it comes to Wi-Fi connections, but we'll work with whatever we've got in front of us. We're going to go ahead and switch from this layout to our main layout. And what I want to bring to your attention is that we have a Q&A chat box at the bottom right-hand corner. If you have any specific questions for us or for your peers, go ahead and type that question in the bottom box. Any other things that you have, like comments or reflections or any aha moments, go ahead and feel free to put those in the middle comments and reflections box.
Can you hear me when I speak?
I can.
I believe I'm in the wrong meeting. Can you tell me who I'm speaking with, please?
Oh, this is Matthew Sweeney from the Colorado Department of Education. If you are in the wrong meeting, this is a webinar on service learning. If you are in the wrong meeting, I think you're trying to connect with Gay Horn.
Yes,
is that correct? All right. Yeah, she will not be on this line. She sent out a new line, so if you can go ahead and disconnect and reach out to her, she'll be able to help you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, great. Well, you know, what's a great webinar without a little hiccup to start? So we're going to go ahead and dive right into it. I want to introduce everybody that we have in the room today. I'll start with myself, and then I'll let them introduce themselves. I am Matthew Sweeney here at the Colorado Department of Education in the Office of Adult Education Initiatives. I am our Project and Technology Coordinator, and I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Cody, to my right.
Hello, my name is Cody Buchanan. I'm a Community Partnership Specialist for the Dropout Prevention and Student Re-Engagement Unit here at CDE. Also representing the Colorado Service Learning Council, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, but happy that everyone could join us, and passing it now to Maureen.
Hi everybody, it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm Maureen Rudy. I work for Metropolitan State University and their Family Literacy Program. I'm part of the program management team.
Great. Well, thank you all again for joining us, and we're going to go ahead and dive right in here with a little explanation about the Colorado Service Learning Council. It's something that all three of us are a part of and connects directly to this topic.
Yeah, and this is Cody. I do see a couple other council members in the room today, so hello to Tamara and Lori. But just wanted to give a quick plug for the Colorado Service Learning Council, which is a network of service learning practitioners, experts, and aficionados across the state who are looking to work together to network and capacity build around service learning. If you visit us at coloradoservicelearning.org, you can find more information about the work that we do and learn how to become a member if you choose. I'd also like to just talk a little bit about what we hope to get out of today. Obviously, we, as Matt said, we're thankful that everyone could join us on what has turned into a pretty ugly day, at least here in Denver, and I'm assuming across the state, though I like to think of this as good webinar weather, so hopefully at least some of you are in slippers and drinking hot chocolate. Pajamas. Otherwise, we may be done a couple minutes early, but still plenty of time for you to get an early start to your weekend and get home safely on a snowy day. But we're going to start with a quick introduction of what service learning is so that we can make sure we're all using the same language and talking about kind of the same concepts. So just a quick overview of how the Colorado Service Learning Council has defined service learning and how it's used to improve student outcomes both with youth and with adult learners. We are going to hear from Maureen about an awesome model that they've developed and used to facilitate intergenerational service learning that can hopefully serve as a great example for you guys and inspire some ideas that you can take back into your programs. And Matt is going to help us at the end tie it all together with some implementation strategies, and again hopefully encourage you to consider utilizing service learning as an effective programming strategy at your sites. So let's jump into a quick definition of service learning. And I promise that we're not going to be in the habit of reading slides to you, but the Colorado Service Learning Council has developed this definition over the course of several years, kind of amalgamating a lot of different definitions from a lot of different industries or sectors of the education field. And I think we all really like where we ended with this definition. So it's an evidence-based teaching and learning strategy that integrates meaningful service with leadership, academic instruction, guided reflection to enrich the learning experience, teach civic and personal responsibility, and strengthen communities. Now there's a lot of pieces in this definition that are all really important to the overall concept of service learning. Now we often hear how our education systems are slow to respond to the changing needs of our economy. Service learning approach can put you out in front of these changes by fostering both academic learning, developing 21st century learning skills, things like teamwork, time management, public speaking, creative problem solving, self-agency, and these things are supported by putting participants in leadership roles. So combining that leadership with academic instruction is really central to the idea of service learning. The other piece I want to touch on here is the civic engagement piece. So teaching civic and personal responsibility and strengthening communities is a really important part of service learning as well. And when it's done with quality, all of these skills are being developed in your participants simultaneously. Recent data from the Colorado Civic Health Index shows that less than half of our Colorado residents vote in local elections. And looking at traditionally underserved communities, minority communities, that number is much lower. So many people believe that schools have a responsibility to prepare young people to be civically engaged. And service learning can be a great tool to help build those skills. So let's look at what service learning is not. Service learning is differentiated from community service really with that intentional integration of skill building and academic instruction. That is really the central idea here, but also just you guys, if someone could just throw in the chat box, what's the first thing you think of when you hear the term community service?
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse.
Absolutely. So the way that a lot of people think about community service is that punitive, in that punitive context. So we really like to encourage schools and community groups to move away from the term community service to really highlight the learning and skill building that goes on in a service learning experience. Same with volunteering. Volunteering is incredibly worthwhile on its own, but to kick it up a notch and incorporate skill building, the big distinguishing factor in my mind between volunteerism and service learning is giving participants that leadership piece. So having participants given the option to decide on what projects they're doing and how to best incorporate the talents of the people participating, that's what really differentiates volunteerism from service learning. Obviously, it's not punitive. In order for service learning to work effectively and participants to get those enriching skill-building experiences, they have to be bought in. And if it's punitive or assigned or mandated, it makes it really hard to get buy-in from the participants. The other misconception is that service learning is expensive. You know, service learning projects can exist on any scale. Whether you're organizing a neighborhood cleanup or working towards a massive policy change, by identifying and rallying stakeholders and potential partners, leveraging the assets that are at your disposal, you can greatly expand your capacity to make change, and often with very little financial obligation for you or your program. For good ideas on how to do that effectively, and we're going to have a resource page at the end here, but just want to plug the Service Learning Clearinghouse, which is linked on our resource page, but anybody can find it on Google, and there's a ton of great curriculum ideas for all funding levels. Let's quickly walk through what the stages of service learning are. So Catherine Berger Kay has been a leader in the service learning field for many years and has identified 5 stages to a quality service learning project. We're going to walk through them today to just make sure that everybody is again using the same understanding of service learning. But as we talk about this, I definitely encourage you to think about, one, where are these stages or tasks that we're going to talk about already existing in your program, and where can you see incorporating some of this into the projects that you're already doing. The first step for a good service learning project is the investigation piece. And the investigation is really a 2-part investigation. You're identifying the skills and passions of your participants, and you're also identifying the needs and assets of the community that you're hoping to serve. This is the part where you begin to generate buy-in. You can use focus groups or surveys or other strategies to tease out the passions and talents of your participants. But by identifying and utilizing these passions and talents, you allow participants to have some skin in the game and also to get in where they fit in and really foster that idea of self-agency and leadership, which is really important for that skill building piece. And by mapping the needs and assets of your community, we all right there? All right. By mapping the needs and assets of your community, you can start to hone in on specific project ideas, identifying potential partners and stakeholders, and then, these will all be really important folks for the later stages of the process. Once you've really kind of identified who you're working with and what are the kind of issues that you're hoping to address, you can start the next stage, which is planning and preparation. Now this involves researching the issue, building partnerships, prepping logistics, but as you build your team and you kind of decide on the...
Have a good one.
Continue.
Thanks. Can we just have everyone just put it on mute unless you want to chime into the webinar here? Thank you. So again, once you have built your team and you've kind of decided what is the issue that you hope to address, you can begin to develop a plan to address that issue. So what is your course of action? This is often the longest and most important phase of your project. And as Maureen talks to us a little bit about the way that they approach this at Metro, pay special attention to all the planning and preparation that goes into the projects that they put together. But some important things to think about are how do you clarify roles and responsibilities amongst your team? How and who will you assign to reach out to your potential partners and build those partnerships? How do you identify who needs to be at the table to make the changes that you want to make? How will you set timelines and benchmarks and goals to determine the success of your project? And how do you consider the logistics of the next phase of your project, which is the action phase? And again, the more prepared and the more planning that you've done, the more successful your action phase will go. Now, this is also a really important time to note that if you are faithful to this model and give each of these stages the time and attention that they deserve, then the success of the actual action isn't even that important. it means a lot to the community service piece, but the skill building will happen whether or not you achieve the goals that you set out to achieve if you have fidelity to this model. So if you're taking the time to do investigation, if you're looking for opportunities to incorporate research and academic skills, giving everybody on the team opportunities to participate in the way that fits best with their skills and abilities, giving everybody opportunities to feel that degree of leadership and ownership over the project, then you're going to see that skill building happening whether or not the action ends up making the change that you set out to make. The important part to think about here on the actual, when you're actually conducting your project, is to really document. Taking pictures, journaling, maybe interviewing some of your participants. These are all really important because you want to have a record of what you've done so that you can accurately reflect on where you've been. And that's the next stage. So reflection is really continuous throughout the process. We put it forth because we look at it, really talking about two things here. One is reflecting throughout, from the very, very beginning. So as you're identifying the skills and passions of your participants, you do that through a reflection. Looking at planning and preparation and touching base about how everybody feels about the process, ensuring that all of your participants remain bought in. These are all really important reflections to do throughout. And another thing to just keep in mind as you're facilitating this project is that reflection in and of itself is a skill. So by continuously and intentionally reflecting and leading reflection, you're building those reflective skills in your participants, which will continue to benefit them long after this project is over. And then the last piece of this is demonstration and sustainability. So how do you allow the participants to take credit for their hard work? How do you show the community that this has been done? This allows for your program to really increase its ties and connections with the communities that you're serving. It really helps for your participants to feel both vested in the community and develop that sense of agency and civic responsibility and feel that sense of pride that they've made a difference. And then the sustainability piece is also very important. So maybe your funders, or if you're in a school, maybe it's the administration, or maybe it's your supervisors in your professional role. How do you discuss not just the result of the action, but the skill building that happened in all of these stages in a way that builds support for service learning moving forward? And obviously you're going to refer to the documenting that you did back in stage 3, in the action stage. This will be really helpful as you kind of identify what changes you will make. Are you going to continue to approach this issue from another angle? If you weren't successful in reaching the goals that you set out to reach, are you going to attempt this again? And what are you going to do differently next time? Having that documentation will be really, really important as you move back to investigation, which is really kind of the cyclical nature of service learning. So that's a quick overview of the service learning process. And I've touched on a lot of this in describing the process, but these are the things to really consider when considering whether or not to incorporate service learning in your project. It really does value individual gifts, and that's a huge part of buy-in. And I think a lot of what we struggle to do in the education system, the education systems that we use, both with youth and adult learners, is how do we differentiate our approach to honor individual gifts and talents. And service learning can be an awesome way to do that. resiliency and perseverance is hugely important. We're going to talk a little bit about, dropout prevention, but looking at, retention and whether it's degree attainment or certificate attainment, I think resiliency and perseverance is something we're trying to build in all of the students that we serve. Again, whether we're talking about youth or adults, these are really valuable skills that are fed by service learning. Self-esteem and self-respect kind of along in that same vein. Obviously, teamwork and interpersonal connections are huge. Demonstrating real-world applications for academic learning is a huge, important piece here because, as we will see in the next few slides, a lot of the reason that we lose people along the way as we try and move them towards high school and certificate attainment is failing to see that real-world application for what they're learning. And service learning really does that. It makes that kind of connects the dots for folks in a really powerful way. The one thing that I want to mention here that's missing is that it really can develop and feed relationship building between facilitators and participants. And that can be really, really important in the youth and school context, but also, again, feeds that that retention. And you know that if you have a good relationship with the students that you're serving, then they're primed to acquire the skills that you're helping them to, or that you're hoping for them to acquire. So this always stands out to me. The silent epidemic is based on research that was done a while back, but I think that it would still hold because, looking at the fact that all students, a majority of students feel like service learning has a big effect on student engagement and keeping dropouts in school. But the fact that we see even greater feelings around that amongst marginalized populations who are traditionally most at risk for dropout is really powerful, and I think speaks a lot to the power of service learning as a dropout prevention strategy. When we talk about both kind of relationship building, relevancy of curriculum, teamwork and relationship building with peers, developing that sense of agency, all of those things really feed student engagement, and the biggest indicator of student engagement is attendance. The biggest indicator of risk of dropout is attendance. And if you look at this chart here, you'll see that over the past several years in Colorado, our students have been on track to their habitual truant rates, their attendance is poorer and poorer. So this is definitely an alarming trend for those of us here in dropout prevention. And I think, again, just kind of underscores the need for us all to consider pedagogies and education approaches that really engage students. I'm just going to throw a couple more stats at you here. Last year, the on-time graduation rate was 77%. So about 3/4 of our students in high school are graduating on time. Now that falls to 70% for minority students. The dropout rate last year was 2.5%. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, but 2.5% of students, that's 11,114 students in Colorado dropped out of high school last year. 11,000 students dropped out of high school last year in Colorado. Now that number jumps to 3.7% when you look at African American students. So again, seeing that figures like the chart you have in front of you now really demonstrate that amongst Latino and African American students, we see even greater affinity for service learning, I think, again, underscores the value of this pedagogy in our education systems.
So to build off of what Cody was presenting, for those of you that are working in and around dropout prevention, either as a K-12 institution, whether as an after-school program, whether as a higher education institution that is re-engaging that adult learner, or an adult education instructor or program who is kind of at the front lines of really introducing education back to this student in a different format, we want to promote to you that this is an engagement strategy that will allow you to reconnect with your students in a different way. So some of the statistics that you see up here, the percentages that you see up here, are gathered from two very important reports. One is referencing back to the silent epidemic, which is Perspectives of a High School Dropout. Essentially, that report was interviewing recent high school dropouts and trying to determine what would have kept them to persist, or what would re-engage them in the education system. And in addition, another reference is Engage for Success. We'll have more references to this if you want to learn dig deeper or learn further. But what's most important to communicate here is that all too often for the populations that we serve, or those that are on this phone call right now, the traditional classroom education misses an opportunity for that real-world application of learning outcomes. And that's really where you start to see the disconnection from students or disengagement from the content. So those students need to focus on the world around them, so the education is not relevant to them at that point, because what is most important and what is most pertinent is what your life is about. You know, whether that is determining how you're going to pay rent, determining how you're going to resolve the conflict that you have internally with your family or your friends. So it's important to know that the more that you engage learners with the application of the content to the real world, the more likely they are to be connected to that content and to be able to map it on in their own real lives. So moving to the next slide, what I want to show you is the academic foundation that is existing behind a lot of these statistics that we're promoting. So this is just a quick diagram of what a service learning project looks like for, from the student perspective and the student thinking perspective at each phase. So what you start to see here is at the very, very beginning of the development of the project and the investigation, planning, and preparation stage for those students, you start to see what is present, comprehensive or divergent thinking amongst the group. And this is an opportunity for them to start developing some really critical thinking skills and promote their creativity. That's when it really comes to the surface, because the way that they look at a problem, or each student can look at a problem differently. So this divergent thinking helps when considering who to help, or who to serve, or what needs are most important, or how to implement the project, or what logistics are most essential. And then once you start getting into a reflection on the planning and preparation, will those logistics work? You start to see this convergent thinking around, yes, they will work for this reason, or no, they won't, and we have to go in this direction. And that convergent thinking ultimately lands on reflective thinking. And as Cody mentioned before, this process or evolution of the thinking process really starts to develop a habit of mind in the learner that stops and pauses for continuous reflection, which breeds critical thinking. So these are those skills that may be called critical employability skills in your field. They may be called soft skills, 21st century skills. All of that is at play when you're working through a service learning project. In addition, with that being said and that being known now, it's important to point out how many of the students who, from the silent epidemic, had dropped out, had communicated that they would feel more positive about their school if they had more service learning opportunities. And in addition, the number of students who communicated that doing service learning was an experience that led to stronger relationships with their teacher. Like, these are important and essential components, because as we continue to talk about what are the root causes of student or learner disengagement from content, whether you're a program, a high school, a higher education institution, there is no single panacea or silver bullet for addressing that. But what we're advocating for is service learning as teaching pedagogy rooted in some academic principles that can help promote a little stronger engagement with your learner. And the diagram that you're seeing here is from Swale's geometric model of student persistence and achievement, which acknowledges that student success depends on the interaction of the student and the institution, but more specifically, how the institution understands and reacts to the cognitive and social attributes of the institution. So when a student feels a stronger connection to their teacher or to their institution, they are more likely to stay engaged and less likely to become another number of attrition in your own program. So that's essentially the framework for why this is something important. We wanted to give you the evidence behind this practice, and what we felt may be most beneficial to you is helping you to understand an intergenerational model that's occurring in our community right now. So we're going to take an opportunity to pass this on to Maureen Rudy to talk a little bit further about the intergenerational service learning model that she has been implementing at her program at MSU Family Literacy.
Great, thanks, Matt. It's kind of nice to have sort of all that framework in place to begin. I wanted to let you know a little bit about the background of our program. So Metro State University Family Literacy is a philanthropic initiative of the university, and our goals are really to align with the strategic goals of the university, and part of that includes impactful community engagement and the advancement of the public good. And really through this transformative process in urban communities, Metro State University is kind of a non-traditional university in that many of the students are older, and it kind of aligns well with the whole adult education world for us as well. This program specifically is a multi-generational program, and it provides for families as they build both English and academic skills. It also promotes community engagement and civic participation. So some of this we have added on as time has gone by, and quite a bit is new to us in this expansion. We have received support to implement this service learning model from the National Centers for Families Learning, and I will refer to them as NCFL for the majority of the time we're together. They are in public-private collaboration with the Toyota Motor Corporation, and they created something called the Toyota Families Learning Project. And this is really instrumental in providing for the educational needs and reaching out to communities who are ethnically diverse and are often in the spectrum of low income. And part of the whole genesis of this was to have families contribute in a real-world way to strengthening the communities in which they live. So these efforts that are guiding the MSU Denver Family Literacy Program are we're part of a nationwide working group right now that's contributing to research being conducted by the Goodling Institute at Penn State University. And their findings can be viewed online. I have quite a bit of this on the last slide under the resources, and it may really interest some of you that are considering beginning service learning or expanding existing programs, because I think when you hearken back to that research, it sort of will direct your attention for the next phase of what you might want to do. So the initial investigation is where we're going to start, and we have bracketed the terminology that Cody was using because we wanted you to see how each of these stages work. So you'll see that throughout my slides. The family literacy adult education classes take this real-world implementation of classroom instruction and bridge it to both home and community. And initially, we conducted workshops to encourage our adult education learners to investigate and discuss issues and interests that they were interested in. We went with kind of a deficit and asset direction because we wanted people to identify things of interest but also problems, and we didn't want it to sound, Cody mentioned punitive. We really wanted people to say, oh, I'm already familiar with this great thing in my community, maybe we could make it better. It's not always to address negative elements in your community. Sometimes it's to build upon positive strengths. So we found that putting people into small groups, we asked them to build consensus around a room. It was sort of a rotating workshop. And in these small groups, they were asked to narrow down into a focus, and health emerged as our highest priority, and the emphasis was both on nutrition and exercise. So I'm going to walk you through the process, this investigation, and then on to the prep and planning, and then what it looks like in the real world. When we took the exercise and nutrition, we decided to make them into kind of two different paths or two different tracks. And families could participate in one or both, but they had to really take a more significant lead on either nutrition or exercise. That was really up to the individual. And we sought at the beginning to know what prior knowledge was already available. We wanted to know what experience and expertise our participants had. Who did they know in the community, both people and organizations? And sometimes the people or the organizations were such that our families had been recipients of services from them. So, that was a really nice transition into being providers ourselves through service learning. Technology training was really important. Most of the people that are part of a lot of the adult education programs have kind of little to no computer exposure, and so we found that most of the family literacy enrollees might have had a telephone and might have had a smartphone, but not necessarily any computer skills. So technology training involved computer basics. It was email with Gmail, so everybody would end up with a Gmail within the first couple of weeks. We did internet basics to include understanding domains and online security and how to maneuver through the internet. And a lot of that was conducted in partnership with Denver Public Library. They provided staff that came on site and helped to facilitate this initial course, these initial courses, if you will, in computer instruction. So I kind of wanted to give you a background about that. As far as the resource gathering, what organizations work in the places we live was what we began to look for online. So who knew of community service providers, and how could we find other things based upon where we are sitting geographically? So we used a lot of web-based instruction. We did guided exploration of nonprofits and schools and resource centers, different community groups that were relevant to the populations we serve. And much of this contributed to the development of work and common core skills. So I know we're kind of speaking to two audiences today, and college and career readiness is kind of one vein, and then the other is really K-12 standards, so all the common core. And we're trying to kind of bridge both of these through some of the work that we do, because we feel that it speaks to both. The research was really paramount. We found that information about organizations also included small details like who do you contact and what is their position and how is it best to get a hold of people. We had parents making introductions about the program. Sometimes that was easier done in native language, and other times it was sort of guided through an initial note or letter. And then finding locations and times and places was all part of that initial investigation process. Are we going to go to the poll question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
So we wanted to take an opportunity, as advocates for reflection, we wanted to take a pause and give you a chance to reflect on, based on what Maureen just presented there, do you have any resources that you can think of for conducting an investigation? Please feel free to add it in the box. Hey everyone, I noticed that you may not be contributing some reflections. We put a little panel box in there for you to add some resources to consider on how you can do this investigation. These could be things like using computers that you have at your site, mobile devices, taking surveys of your students, having a panel discussion or a facilitated discussion with your students to figure out who they know, what maybe organizations that they have contact with, or ones that they work with closely. So you can take another second, and then we'll continue with the presentation. Awesome. Thank you so much for providing that, Tamara.
So we're going to keep moving on. As I told you, we have the 2 tracks. So we're going to, I'm going to walk you through the nutrition track. It just is easier to sort of focus in on one service learning planning and preparation rather than several at the same time. So the National Centers for Families Learning also have the service learning process, which will be very reminiscent of what Cody shared with you with the Colorado Service Learning Council steps and stages. This one, in our initial stage, the planning part, that includes our investigation, and that's our longest time because it's backed by extensive classroom instruction and practice, especially with computers, because developing those technology skills takes a really long time. Sometimes people can't remember that they're not logging into Gmail from the internet, that they have to actually go to Gmail. And so that is a pretty laborious process that reaps great results with a great deal of patience. After the planning stage, in the preparation part, we identify and formulate how to implement the service learning experience. And then under that, we really look at defining responsibilities, assigning duties, gathering materials, and the logistics of creating a service learning opportunity. And think of all the little things that maybe would not initially creep into your awareness spectrum. What to bring, where to be and when. What to wear is a big part of that. Are you going to be outdoors? Is the weather questionable? I mean, here we are at the very end of April on a what should be a beautiful spring day, and it's snowing. So keeping in mind all of those little parts and pieces, we think is very important in the preparation period. The experience is really just the act of participating in a service learning project. And then the debriefing we call reflection as well. I like both of those words. Reflective sounds a little bit more of a mirror image, a little bit more introspective, but debrief is more conversational. So if you can kind of keep both of those terms in mind, I think that's a good idea. Then the transfer part is really taking ownership and expanding. It's what you demonstrate beyond this initial experience. So to give you an idea of how this planning and preparation begins, I wanted to share a little bit about our parenting classes. We have a multifaceted curriculum in family literacy, and embedded in this life and work curriculum that we teach, we really touch on all the skills of listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and then numeracy and technology development also. And our integrated instruction really uses approaches that address visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning styles. At the center of this is home to community. So experiential learning provides practical application of these skills. So this is long before we're actually participating in a service learning project. The pictures that you see on the screen, obviously one is a classroom. The second one is a field trip with Cooking Matters. And when we were learning about nutrition in the classroom, parents learned vocabulary for nutrition and ingredient vocabulary and price comparison and percentages and daily requirements. So then we were able to apply that knowledge by doing a tour of the grocery store, doing compare and contrast, looking at nutrition labels. So you really could take that instruction apply it, and in a large group, so it was kind of fun as well. And then look back to themselves and their families, and if you're choosing between two different whole grain products, which one is actually better for your family? And so people were introduced to this whole idea of nutrition, but then able to apply it to specific items in the grocery store. Now, after our parenting class, we have something called Pack Time, and that's known as Parent and Child Time Together in long form, but that provides an opportunity for parents to share together. In a more traditional model, parent time might happen if you're a library program where the children are with the parents for some part of the day. We have an early preschool program as part of our program, so the parents who have youngsters involved in that will spend a portion of each week in the early family classroom. But for the rest of our students, their children are in traditional elementary, middle, and high schools, and so that contact together isn't really facilitated during the school day. We see primarily the parents. So we give them, let's say call it family homework, and it's an opportunity for a lot of cultural sharing. One of the important components of creating this cohesive family is having the ability for parents to really value the cultures they come from. So while they're developing English skills, we really want them to also be sharing their own cultures, because that is a level of learning and a touchstone for the whole family unit. So the other part is the parent efficacy. Parents really know that they have learned some knowledge. So after going to the grocery store and doing price comparison, perhaps the next time they're in the grocery store with their children, they're teaching those same skills. And we really give lots of homework that's hands-on experiential learning for parents to do together. So from time that they take to read, this shows you creating some food as art, shopping for groceries with seasons in mind and colors in mind, to growing a family garden. You'll see a family on the right-hand side that are planting seeds and beginning to grow their own garden. And we're trying to encourage both creativity and goal setting for families. So when I mentioned shopping for colors, for youngsters, it could be this week we're going to eat only purple vegetables, or on Mondays we're going to eat purple and Tuesdays we're going to eat yellow. So just to make it a lot more fun when you're grocery shopping, and also probably taking a few risks in buying foods that you've never experienced before. We weave technology into the entire process. So we're promoting this digital literacy, and that's sort of my center slide. NCFL has some wonderful open-ended questions presented on their Wonderopolis site, and I did put a link at the end for that. They have a Wonder of the Day, so it can pop up on your home phone, or it can pop up on a tablet, and it's an open-ended question to explore different topics, but they can look up countless things about nutrition and food and find some really fun and interesting information to start a conversation in the house. Family used many different sites to explore nutrition. There's something called the Family Time Machine that's put out by NCFL and Toyota, and it offers some wonderful packed activities around meals. You can also upload your own experience as a lesson to share with others. So I have a heap of resources beyond what I've printed. You're welcome to contact me if you'd like to know more. But these provided a great launching place for nutritional learning. Going from Pack Time into the community, Family Literacy facilitated educational workshops. So we used Denver Urban Garden resources, and we had families spend half a day learning about what grows in Colorado. So that's the top left picture that you're looking at. We did seed sorting, the germination process. We did learning about what grows in what season in Colorado and what can't grow here. The seed sorting involved looking at what is edible and non-edible, at fruits versus vegetables, sorting by the length of the growing cycle. So we had all these different ways that people could sort and organize and categorize. So that was a great contribution to considering making graphs, charts, reading information, and cataloging all of that. Let's see. We also had, you'll see underneath the little girl on the left, we had a large butcher paper covering on the table. So a lot of what we did, we had crayons and had people color and draw and make calendars, and that was a lot of fun because it was all hands-on. There was a PowerPoint presentation, but during that whole process, we were really using Realia to augment what we were instructing. After learning how and when to plant and what would grow, families then proceeded to plant their own initial seeds in pots and grow their food. So some of that was maintained in the classroom and some of it went home. We decided to start most in the classroom in sunny areas so that people could see the progress of the seeds, and for the children that were in that school, they were able to visit their seeds until they were ready to go home. We conducted another session on backyard gardening, and we went to a couple of big backyard gardens, and we had parents and children test the alkalinity of the soil. They explored and touched and tasted food from the garden, and they also learned how to compost. So that was a very productive day. I might just add that we also made that a potluck day, because bringing together the community and all these kids beyond the learning part and beyond the hands-on part to just enjoy each other's company was a really nice extension to this learning activity. So the service in action is really our service learning opportunity. So for after all that learning, the parents were ready for that first service learning experience. And parents had the opportunity to join family literacy staff on a tour of the Denver Grow House Urban Garden. Parents found contact people at the organization. They found out about different classes and lessons that were offered on site. And then after opportunities were offered for participation, we decided to make it into two different groups because we had so many families interested that we returned to the garden in 2 different days. So parents had to have folks sign up. We sort of segmented the group by the ages of the children, and people come one or the other day. They had to provide directions to get to where we were going, and the time and the parking and any other extemporaneous details that made this come together. So that was the very end of the planning, but the service learning project itself was creating the vermiculture bins for the garden. Children and parents had little small worms and shredded newspaper and fruits and vegetables, and they would build and mix and prepare this whole vermiculture for composting. So their hands-on was a lot of fun and pretty messy, and some people thought worms were awesome and others were kind of grossed out, so it depended how much involvement on what your level of comfort with little critters was. They also tended to the leaves and flowers around the grow house, pinching off dead flowers or broken limbs and then washing down some of the leaves. A whole group of children and their parents also pitchforked and sifted the compost material that Grow House uses for all of their gardening. Our second visit also included aquaponics, so learning about how plants grow in water and being able to create an aquaponics pond for the garden, and then they have the knowledge then of what they could buy to do it themselves in their own community garden or in their own homes. So after those 2 days of experience, we then did a debrief and wrap-up, and we really conducted this with the parents. We had them ask their children some things as well, but we wanted to make it very simple. And I know this says 11114, but it's really 1, 2, 3, 4. We wanted parents to consider both the project and the process. We asked them to critically think about the experience, to identify the good and the bad, and decide if this was something they would like to do more with. And it was really a sharing. Some of it was to reflect and think on your own, and the other part was sharing out with the rest of the group. And for many, this was their first working experience with their children. So meaningful and fun are probably the summary of that. And, you know, I wouldn't expect great and deep reflection on your first few forays into this world, because it's hard for people to not want to just give you an answer. And so to consider how this affected them or what they really enjoyed and what they really liked is definitely a process. It doesn't come easily, and it takes some development. And the more that it happens, the easier it becomes. Some of the people were interested in learning more about the opportunities with the Grow House with their families, and a number of parents then decided to share this gardening workshop. So my final slide is the expansion of this program.
Okay.
If you are unmuted, if you could just mute your phone or your computer, that would be great. So once again, we kind of revert back to that initial planning. The parents were going to take a PowerPoint that was done with from Denver Urban Gardens and Metro State University Family Literacy, and practice doing it in Spanish in some of the classrooms and some in English. They had to contact the teacher and the school administration. They had to figure out how they were getting all of the materials, the plants, the seeds, the soil, the containers, who was going to pick it up, what time would they be getting it, where are you delivering it to, who is there to receive it, and the delegation of all the duties kind of began once again. They conducted the workshop with elementary school students in Denver Public Schools, and many of the parents in the slides that I'm showing you did not know any of the children in this class. It isn't like they were parents of all the children. One parent in this particular slide had a child in this classroom, but all of the other participants had never even walked inside this school before. So this was a really new and brave experience. I think you have to be quite nimble, and you have to really instill some level of confidence in your learners that they are able to do this. I put on the side some project management skills. Those are very large developmental skills for families that we work with. The confidence building is critical. Knowing the material and being able to practice it enough to be comfortable. They had to answer questions about what they were presenting, and really built upon their own educational growth by doing these presentations. We feel like the opportunity to do something like this creates stronger households, because those families, those parents went home and told their children what they had done in a different classroom, and also had some really neat pictures to share, and made a deeper connectivity for parents in the school building. So keeping in mind all of this, we have also supported 5K races as the individual volunteer support. We've done that for 3 different races in Denver. We've also done a number of projects with Project Angel Heart, taking the materials, doing it initially very similarly to the way that we first conducted this nutrition training. And then parents took Project Angel Heart service learning opportunities into 9 different schools and proceeded to do a bag decoration for people who are suffering from life-threatening illnesses, and Project Angel Heart provides them meals on a weekly basis. So for parents to understand the material, to be able to be confident enough to present it, and to build on their own social capital by creating all of these new networks, we feel that parents are then much more empowered and interconnected in the community, and really that will lead to very positive outcomes for their children. So I'm happy to answer any more of this. I'm going to turn it back over to Matt to kind of synthesize this whole process from the framework through the experience.
Thank you, Maureen. We felt it was such a wonderful project to highlight here, and Maureen did a wonderful job, like really illustrating that demonstration stage and why it's so important to take what you've learned and communicate to the rest of the field. So to continue with our modeling what we're advocating for, we want to incorporate this second poll question here for you as a point of reflection. So based on what Maureen just shared, what was it that stood out the most to you, or what sort of ahas or great ideas or great or fantastic reflection questions really stood out that you can kind of take with you? So if you can take a moment to add that into this chat box, we'd be really appreciative of those reflections. These are all great insights. Thank you so much for providing these. We also want to take an opportunity, if you do have direct questions, we've got a little extra time, so I see that one just came in. The adults, did you ask the adults to reflect on any changes in their relationship with their children?
As a result of what they experienced. I didn't ask specifically that. We asked, what did this feel like to you as a parent? And a lot of the responses are similar. Many people said, Maureen, I've never done anything like this before. So, they say that with a big grin. But I don't know that the identification of a relationship altering was resident yet. And even further into this process, I don't know if people will do that. Now, I will say there is an interesting amount of ownership that I've watched occur now that we've been doing this for, as I said, we're in the second year of this. So some of the people are still involved. The ways that a few of the families have really done things on their own that have, I'll give you an example. Denver Urban Grow House had a whole seed swap day about a month ago, and we were not going to do that as a volunteer group, but I wanted everyone to know about the opportunity. So a few of our former students who really already graduated from this, but are still involved as much as they choose to be, they just don't have the requirement to log what they're doing and let us know all of it. They went and they worked the seed swap, and that's really a cool thing because they knew the value of receiving the seeds. They were familiar enough with the Urban Grow House, and they could contribute because they knew what it meant to volunteer. And I've also experienced that with a couple of other races where they've gone and volunteered for a race that because they know what volunteer support looks like. So they're doing more on their own in community. I don't know that people have actually said there are changes in the relationship, but I like that question. That might be a further one to ask now that we've seen people through quite a few of these. We have altered the questions from time to time, but we wanted the comfort of what they were expected to report back on and really practice the reflection part.
I'd like to piggyback on Tamara's comment about the home-to-school connections. That's a huge part of it as well because, that helps encourage parents to consider the opportunities to reinforce learning at home and to do it with a structure and framework is great. So you're kind of simultaneously developing all of the skills that we talked about earlier, but you're also supporting parenting skills by doing that. And I think that's just an awesome kind of side benefit of doing this intergenerational service learning with parents and adults.
Do you have any information on retention or any of that, like engagement?
No, Matt was asking me if we have information on retention. The way that the program is structured is that at the end of a calendar year or the end of a school calendar year, the families that participate graduate. We have a formal graduation at MSU Denver on the campus, and I was really pleased because Lori McKinney came to our last graduation, and Matt did as well. And then the second year, all of the participants that were in the first year are welcome to stay involved, and we hope that they will continue to, and most of them have. But we had a whole new group for the second round. We will have a whole new group for the third round too. So it's sort of this cyclical cycle. We have an obligation for a certain number of families that we've served, but we've expanded the opportunities to more of our larger family literacy programs. So we are still really connecting people and hoping to see, but I don't know that I have specific data of the graduates. I have more of anecdotal data because they've shared it with me. Yeah.
Thanks for everybody who
Yeah.
chimed in with comments. And we see you guys in the Q&A box as well. So.
Oh, Donna, in answer to your question, we have a multi-level classroom. Most of the students that are involved, most of the adults that are involved are SPL 4 and higher. If you are lower, that's perfectly fine, but we sort of had to choose in our classes those that would be most likely to engage their children. And as I mentioned with the expansion, we will probably include everyone that's enrolled in family literacy in our program in the service learning part next year, with perhaps a few exceptions if there are people that really would not be committed to this. So I hope that answers your question.
Great. Well, we're going to, and for the sake of time, we're going to move through the kind of the third phase of our presentation, which is really intended to help you map on what you've heard today in your own life or in your own program. So as a point of inspiration, we're going to kind of start with this great quote from Arthur Ashe that says, to get moving in this direction, really do what you, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. Because one thing that we do want to acknowledge in this presentation is that the model that Maureen just presented may not be feasible for everyone. And that is okay, but what the essential elements are, the core components are still things that can be beneficial to your students' parents, or to your students' children. So what we're going to do, we're going to kind of go quicker through this point, but we wanted to say, like, here are some great starting points for you to consider how you may start considering the implementation of a service learning project at your own site. First, start considering where it may fit. If you have existing lessons or units that have pre-identified outcomes, that's always a great start, because those outcomes can be the starting point for your vision for what the project may be. So how do you develop a project that aligns with those learning outcomes? Also, think about if you have core structures that are accommodating to these sort of service learning project-based structures. So if you have a capstone, group projects that already exist, it could be a great opportunity to weave in the service learning element of it and some of those essential components to get a stronger impact with your students. In addition, identifying who you have, both internal and external needs, surveying your students, surveying your community, getting a better picture of what it looks like, where your needs are, where your strengths are, and then developing the project around that information. And then finally, how is it going to all play out? So is it going to be student-led, family-led, instructor-led? Is it going to be a one-time event or occur over a period of time? These are things that you could start brainstorming with before you really get into the meat and potatoes of logistics.
Before Matt changes this slide, the one thing I wanted to interject is that when we were initially developing this webinar, we were talking about the who, and you know, when you consider what the other teachers or other administrators or other people that you work with, people's lives outside of their day job might be really good connectivity places. So I mentioned Project Angel Heart, and one of our instructors has worked for them as a volunteer for 14 years. So to have somebody that is ready to make an introduction, and you know the contact person to begin this process, you also may know the needs that the organization requires from their volunteers. What needs are they serving? That's a great way to launch into something. So you're not blindly looking just online. You're finding things that people actually know. So I wanted you to just keep that in mind.
And one more quick plug for the Colorado Service Learning Council, because that's another great place to go to network with organizations and individuals who are ready to support you in your service learning journey.
All right, so the most important step is just identify your internal team. If you don't have one already, this is crucial because you want to be able to have a diverse set of perspectives that can help you to determine how do you pull this thing off. Whether that is a group of instructors or lead instructors, whether that is some administrative staff or a group of students who are eager to contribute to a sort of project-based lesson. And then in addition to that, I wanted to highlight some action verbs and take the 5 stages of service learning and kind of flip them in an introspective way. So investigate those strengths and the needs of your community, plan those logistics, how is it going to happen, the who, what, where, when, and why, act on where you're going to incorporate the learning within that project, whether you are a program that uses the college and career readiness standards, or you are a program that incorporates the Colorado academic standards, or employability skills, or technology or digital literacy skills. This is an opportunity for you to start embedding some of those skills into this project that you are developing. Finally, continue to reflect. As Cody mentioned earlier, reflection is a continuous process. So you reflect on where you're at and where you want to go. You reflect in the middle, are we on track? Are we hitting our goals? And you reflect at the end, is this a project feasible? And then where are we going to get started? And then finally, be sure to demonstrate this project to your stakeholders. So before you launch, whether that's a demonstration of the project to administrators in your organization, an advisory board, a board of directors, keeping them in the loop is essential, and having them understand the value of a project like this and what it will mean for learner engagement can always go a long way to helping you when implementing this sort of strategy. We do want to acknowledge some existing challenges that are there. This is a project that isn't always easy, but the payoffs of it are monumental. So first, consider that buy-in, because it can be very difficult to get a parent or a student or a youth to be engaged in a leadership position. And I think even Maureen may have encountered some of this at the very beginning of the development of her project. How do you get families engaged? How do you get learners engaged, especially those timid students of yours, if they're not accustomed to participating, or if the culture of your learning environment is one where they receive information and are not active contributors into the learning environment, it can be a challenge to get them engaged. So considering buy-in and how that comes about, sometimes you have to plan, execute, reiterate, and then plan and execute, reiterate in a process like that. I don't know if you want to.
Well, I think that for that, the development of the skills, you know, the PowerPoint would be an example. How do you work a PowerPoint? How do you take a thumb drive and be able to transfer it to a different computer? And who's there to help you do some of that? So just to even flip through screens and be able to talk to your screen and not be reading every word, or that takes practice. So for the buy-in to happen and for people to want to take on leadership, they have to have practice. You know, if you wanted me to play you a song on my guitar and I only know my 3 chords so far, it probably wouldn't go over so well.
Punk rock.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, it brings us into kind of our second challenge here, which is facilitating a meaningful reflection. And Maureen, you made this great point earlier in your presentation, how you don't have to have the expectation that they're going to dive really deep into that first reflection, because this could be a new process for our learners as well.
Yeah, very true.
So that can be a challenge for you. Start with simple questions and see how the students respond. And then when moving forward, you can always try to expand that thinking a little deeper and further the more accustomed they become to that reflection process. The third challenge that we want to highlight here is control. I think as an instructor, sometimes you can be very accustomed to control of the learning outcomes in your classroom. And one thing that can come up in a service learning project are many different variables that will basically interrupt that control that you have in the classroom. So, for example, the control of the learning outcome that you wanted to accomplish in project management. And when you go into the project planning process, you start to uncover that some students are learning it, some are not. and maybe what you intended, the initial design of that project doesn't come to fruition, but that doesn't mean it's a miseducative experience. You can always use that as an opportunity to bring it back into a learning experience. You had this partnership, you wanted to work with that food bank, they didn't call you back or they didn't set up that day. That's a great opportunity for you to talk about how sometimes in life these things aren't always going to work out the way that you plan them, so how do you respond? And then finally, that logistics thing. This can be something that within your classroom, sometimes you only have a finite amount of time, and your learners have big lives outside of it. So being able to plan an event that is accommodating to all those schedules can be a big challenge. But again, the payoff can be huge. And so what we wanted to point out also on this slide is that while these challenges exist, acknowledging them and then being committed to continuous improvement and just always reflecting and determining how you can address that challenge in the future or mitigate it in the next go-around is a great way for you to continue to refine the project until it becomes something that is fully engaging for learners. It's completely learner-led and builds the result that you're looking for, the outcome that you're looking for.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that, I think I would just encourage you to not be afraid to be open about these challenges with your participants, because a lot of times you'll be able to tap into their kind of collective brain power to address them, and putting them out on the table brings an awareness on everybody's part that can be really beneficial in having everybody move forward in the same direction.
And maybe also the addressing, just from having done so many of these now, being uncomfortable but okay with the discomfort of the space of, I'm a little bored. Maybe there are too many volunteer people at this experience. I would say that sometimes that has happened for us with a neighborhood cleanup where maybe there isn't that much trash on the street and there are 30 people. So then people get bored and disillusioned by what they're doing, and you hit an alley and then it's full of trash. So knowing that it's okay to be bored for a little bit, or if in a race, the race support part, sometimes you have to wait for runners to come to your station for water, and you have to wait for the race to start. You have to wait for people to run 4 miles to where your recovery station is. So it's okay to be a little bit bored. There's nothing wrong with feeling that way. And it's okay to be a little tired on the other end if this extended your physicality more than you anticipated it would. And so to maybe make sure that you've touched on those things. Some of that is from the learning experience afterwards. Going forward, here were a couple of challenges. My kids didn't have enough to do, or I wasn't able to park where I should have been able to park, or, so that you can take those challenges and kind of turn them into opportunities for learning, and then transition in the next one. Maybe there are a few more logistics we need to touch on, or some more planning that needs to happen. And I think the boredom is something to keep in mind whenever you're participating in something that's broader than your own group.
Thank you. Yeah. And then from a Colorado Department of Education perspective, we would be remiss if we did not help you to identify how this sort of project aligns with some of the objectives in a grant that you may be receiving. So we wanted to just kind of highlight some of the ways that you can incorporate these elements into your service learning project plan. And then finally, I think an essential part is being able to support and sustain these projects. Sometimes you just need to get started, and once you get started, then you start looking at how do you make it better, how do you support it, and then how do you sustain it. So some of the most essential parts of supporting and sustaining are identifying students that are high risk of dropout or exclusion, so they can be included into service learning projects and be participating in a project that promotes stronger student engagement. You want to be able to identify existing areas for opportunity, like those capstone projects or portfolios or student independent projects that could be a nice, quick, and easy fit for a service learning project. Don't forget to continue to provide support to your instructors that are going through this process. Whether you're an administrator or a lead instructor, it's essential to have support, because we talked about some of those challenges that you're going to face. So continued professional development, continued opportunities for for even debriefs amongst colleagues can help you to sustain the energy that is required for a project like this. Don't forget to collect good data, because that's what's going to ultimately help you sustain a project like this and continue to support it in the future. The data that you collect on these projects will in turn help you out when applying for funding from other grant funders, or that's data for helping you go to your advisory board or your board of directors to talk about the value of a project like this and the impact on student learning. Don't forget to encourage partnerships among those practitioners. So when you're taking that data and you're disseminating that data, that's something you can also provide to additional partners. So if you had the gardening project, you worked with a single partner and they're not available in the next semester, then you may be required to find a different partner, a different project, and having that data in advance can help you to communicate really what the structure of a service learning project looks like and get off the ground running a little bit quicker. And then finally, don't forget to share your successes with your community and your funders, because this is a great way to continue to provide additional resources into your program for the good work that you're doing. Any other final comments on that? Great. Well, with that being said, we did plan to have a little breakout session so instructors could talk with instructors and support staff and admin could do that, but we're going to break through that breakout plan and just go right to those additional resources that we've been providing to you. So throughout the presentation, we've referenced research, we've referenced resources, we've referenced educational materials. All of those we want to be able to make available to you. And again, like Cody has been emphasizing throughout the project, we are all members of the Colorado Service Learning Council, which is committed to providing enriched networking opportunities to practitioners and supporters of service learning. So we have a few different areas where we facilitate that sort of networking opportunity, and you can always find our events or some great outreach opportunities through these areas. So please feel free to reach out to us either directly through these avenues. Do follow up with these links, and we
like us on Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Like us on Facebook.
Yeah, that's right. So we want to kind of conclude with a thank you for joining us on this very snowy day. We know it can be very difficult to travel or to even sit in a small room and listen to a webinar on a day like this. So we're very grateful for your participation. Any other concluding thoughts from my esteemed colleagues here?
No, I just would like to wish all of you a good weekend, and we hope to see you guys at the next Service Learning Council meeting on June 2nd.
All right. Have a great weekend, everybody.